So today's webinar is really in response to some of the work that we do with our teacher partners. And what often happens is we notice that there are some trends. So the trends really become sort of frequently asked questions for us. And the more that we notice certain aspects that teachers are struggling with, the more we realize we need to be a little bit more apparent, and we certainly need to educate our partners. So here's how this works. Let's just talk a little bit about what you have your hands on. You do have, some of you have printed materials, some of you use the hub. And then just so that you know what the hub is, it is our digital resource, meaning that it's the printed guide, but kind of on steroids. And so today I'm going to take you into the hub. I'm going to show you what's there, but I'm also going to show you some of those components that are sometimes missed. Not only components from the hub that are missed, but components that we have at Empowering Writers. The beauty of what we do at Empowering Writers is that we are all teachers. And so we put assets into our hub. We make sure that our printed materials are teacher friendly, student friendly, and we also have a main website. So I'm going to take you to both, because everything I'm talking to you about is either contained in the hub, your printed guide, and or is free on our website. So everything here today you have access to, regardless of the resource that you have in your hand. So today's objectives, we're going to go through the hub and look at some of those components that I just talked about. I want to explain our new pacing charts. We've created some brand new pacing charts, and that might be brand new to some of you. And one of the questions that comes up often is in implementation. How long should I work within one section of the guide? I know I have to teach narrative and informational, and how do I flow from one to the other? I'm not sure how to do that. Which one do I start with? And so the pacing charts are going to help us to really explain that to you and alleviate the implementation stumbling blocks that some teachers have. I also want you to know and be able to uncover your standard alignment charts. Every state has some standard alignments, and we have some specific ones that I want to point you in the direction to. And really what those alignment charts do is it takes every one of our lessons and it aligns it with your state standards. So that's really important work, especially if you're going to be observed by your administrator, or you want to make sure that you are in fact meeting the needs of those standards. And then we're going to talk a little bit about our baseline and our checkpoint prompts, and those are the ways that we assess students. And then ultimately, I want to show you our analytic and holistic rubrics, and our brand new rubric that we just posted the other day, our constructed response rubric. So that's really our objectives for our time together. This is going to be a two-part series because, to be honest with you, there is so much that we want to talk about that there was no way that we could do it in one 45 minutes quick webinar. So we decided to break this into two parts. So today is part one, and our focus is on those pacing guides, alignment charts, prompts, and analytic and holistic rubrics. If you choose to come back or register and then at least get the recording, we're going to go through our literature connections, and the hub offers coaching at your fingertips. That's a really important part of the hub. I want to show you the book analysis forms, our lessons of the month, and our blog. Love to write and read all day. So one of the things that we're going to do today is go into our hub resource, and I'm going to take you over to our main website so that you can begin to locate all of the things that you didn't know we had. So I'm just going to stop my share here and head on into our hub. Like I said, our hub is our digital resource, and I just want to show you how I got here. I signed in, and today I'm Brenda Baker in my hub license, and I have a lot of books. You are probably if you're in the hub, you have one or two guides. You might have a narrative and an informational. Some of you who are coming in may have what we call our companion guides, or guides that are specific to your district. And we have several district partnerships, and you see them kind of as I'm flowing through my screen. I want to go over here, and I always like to kind of go in between grade levels. I'm not sure what grade level anyone teaches, but fourth grade's a good example of what every single guide looks like. So I hop into my guide, regardless of what grade level I am. And when I get there, the first thing that opens up is my table of contents. Now, the hub is really designed so that you can very easily move from lesson to lesson, section to section. So when you get into your planning guide, this is what it looks like. And to be honest with you, the planning guide is the perfect landing page. You want to spend time in your planning guide because that's where you learn how to implement all of the pieces that I'm going to share with you. To start with, we just ask you to create a planning guide cover. We give you an overview of why that's important. And that cover right here, I get a binder and I take my binder and I make sure that I have all the pieces that I need for simple implementation. So as I scroll through my planning guide, I have some professional development videos. Some of you know that in the hub, what we've done, and some of you who are printed users and don't know the hub, what we've done is we've created and curated a whole list of professional development videos meant for you to inform your instruction. We have teacher background videos that give you a clue as to the section of the guide. Maybe there's a teacher background on a specific lesson or a specific concept. And so we've given you these kinds of professional development videos so that if you're confused or you don't remember a portion, maybe you came to one of our workshops and you're not quite sure, or you don't remember what the concept is or the skill is, the teacher background videos are going to help you to remember, to remind you, and to help you to plan as well. We've also created modeled lessons, and the beauty of the modeled lessons is that we allow you as the teacher to enter right into a classroom. We've created classroom segments so that you can see the flow of that lesson and how one of our master educators handles that particular lesson plan. Then what I love about it is that you can very easily then go into your own classroom and teach that lesson as well. So it does really inform your instruction. You'll also see we have some videos called planning coaches videos. And those are real conversational in nature. And what we do, myself and my partner, Dea Ore, we come together and we talk about the section. We talk about the pitfalls, the things that you may not know about. And we talk about how you want to kind of move through that section. And the lessons, some of the lessons in particular will highlight. So that professional development list exists only in the hub. Printed users, some of you suggested that you were printed users. You don't have that, and that's because in a printed guide, it's pretty static. The hub is really a moving, changing place where we include lots of different assets. The other real important piece that I know our hub users love, and this is our direct-to-student content. We have direct-to-student content for you to help you literally teach the lesson in your classroom. We have videos, we have PowerPoints that we've developed that are instrumental in helping you to introduce a skill or a concept, or sometimes it's to introduce a text. We also include some interactive slides. Those would be slides that you can assign out to your students to either review or reinforce a specific skill or a concept. Our virtual field trips engage background knowledge for the annotation and analysis lessons. And so there's a whole series of virtual field trips. And we've created narrated texts where we read the samples, the text samples, so that your students who need that review or reinforcement of the text sample or that other reading, we chunk it and we show the text as we're reading it. So those are some really important pieces for you. Those of you who are non-hub users, your printed guide doesn't include those. And that's why the hub is really kind of my go-to resource. That's what I like to be able to use. There's a table of contents. And then here's the piece that's brand new. we've created some pacing guides for you. Now, our old pacing guides, and you in the printed resource, they're printed right in the front of your guide. But our old pacing guides really didn't take into account that you needed to teach every single genre across the scope of your year. And I feel like those original pacing guides just didn't either give you enough time or gave you too much time. And then how were you going to fit everything in? So we went back to the drawing board, our content team, and we created a brand new series of pacing guides. Every grade level, every genre is included in a pacing guide. Now, I'm in a 4th grade unit, but that doesn't mean that's the only one that's out there. Every grade level has one specific to the lessons in your guide. And let me show you a little bit about what we did. First of all, we've done a pacing schedule on a weekly schedule, which is something we've never really done before for our partners. Our kindergarten and 1st grade scope and sequence has always been on a weekly schedule, but we've never really done that. We've really assumed that teachers in the upper grades want to have a little bit more autonomy and want to be able to pull the lessons as they need them. But what we realized is that just wasn't enough guidance. If you're comfortable and familiar with the lessons, this pacing tool is going to help you to structure your scope and sequence. Those of you who have no idea, you're brand new to Empowering Writers, this is really going to be helpful for you. So I'm just going to pop first into our PDF. The PDF file goes week by week. It gives you some general directions and general guidelines. And the very first section of our hub guide is what we call the literacy launch. Now, those of you with printed guides, section number 1 of your guide is called genre and organization. But if you have an informational guide and a narrative guide, you have a section 1 called genre and organization of both of those guides. And what we did at Empowering Writers is we really blended them, so that the first unit of your year, when you're starting your writing instruction, we call it the literacy launch. And what we've done is we've taken important lessons from narrative and informational, and we've blended them together, really married them for you. So each one of the lessons in the literacy launch also exists in one of the printed guides. So let's take a look at how we developed this scope and sequence. We really developed it so that you could have a little bit of freedom and some flexibility in your week. Notice that in week number 1, there's 4 lessons, but I'll be honest with you, lesson number 1 might need to be stretched over 2 days. So we have, in fact, included time for you to take a step back. If you don't have 5 days of writing instruction, that's okay. Some of these lessons are what we call brushstroke lessons. They're only going to take you about 15 or 20 minutes. And some of them are certainly going to take you over the course of a day or 2. And by a day, I mean you're going to be introducing and applying skills across your day. So you might want to introduce within a 40 to 45 minute time segment, but then you can always review, reinforce, or apply a skill across your content area, either within your reading time or science or social studies. So in week number 2, notice there's 4 more lessons. But when we get to week number 3, there's really only 2 lessons and one that's used at your discretion. So what we want you to understand is that we think every lesson should be done, but we also know that there are limitations in time within every school. So we're going to give you some ability to really choose some of those optional lessons for review or reinforcement as you needed with your discretion. And that's really important. So as you look through this, as you scroll through this map, we've got 4 weeks of literacy launch, and then we have 14 weeks of a genre study. So we've given you 14 weeks for informational and 14 weeks for narrative writing. We've also given you some opportunities to make connections across your learning so that you can apply the skill. And notice that the titles in italics are similar, objectively speaking, to the lessons that are in bold. So those that are in italics, take a look at that lesson, view the lesson, make an informed decision based on your student needs. is this something that my students can do easily? Or do I have to go through and think about maybe I have to pull a small group and do that lesson? It may not be something that I have to present to my whole class. So one lesson in particular that I know sometimes kids, especially students in fourth grade, might have a very good background on is what we call our sort and categorize lesson. You've probably been doing this in math class or in other content areas. And so they may not necessarily need that lesson. But once again, I want you to make sure that you go in, view the full lesson, and make your informed decision. So this is the curriculum map that we've established. And as you scroll through, you'll see here's our 14 weeks of informational. I also want you to know that we've embedded times for process writing. So not only are we just going to go through all the skills, but what we really thought about is this. Sometimes I want to be able to process write before I teach all the skills because I want to show my students where those particular skills I've been teaching come. So we've embedded a midway process writing piece for you so that you can do a little process writing and then continue on into your instruction. And then from there, more process writing after you've done the rest of the skills. So there's our informational, and then here's our narrative. So this is literally just a PDF file, download, print that. Now, for those of you who are not Hub users, your print guide users, the very same piece, this very same PDF exists in our website. And I'll take you to our website in a moment, but I want to continue my study here in our Hub guide. So we've given you this weekly pacing guide. But we've also given you another tool, and this is what we're really most excited about. This is an interactive pacing tool. It's a set of Google Slides or PowerPoint slides. I'm going to make a copy of my Google Slides, and then I want to show you exactly what you can do with this. The lessons are all put into small blocks. And as I go through this, you'll see that we've created basically a map. So that when you're going through to try to teach and figure out when am I going to teach this lesson, how long do I need, is this a lesson that flows over a day or two? What we want you to be able to do is take that lesson, click and drag it right into your own curriculum map so that you are now customizing those lessons. The lessons in green are what we deem to be necessary. Those are the ones that really are the absolutes. The lessons that are in the paler color, the yellowy color, those are the ones for review or reinforcement that you can include in your curriculum map. But I want you to just be clear, is that one that my kids need, right? Now, if there's a lesson that you think is going to extend over a day or two, just make a copy of that particular block, add it to your, and then add it right into your day, right? And just add it to 2 days. Okay, so very, very easy to use. And notice this is including the literacy launch, which is your first unit of writing. And then you have your informational skills. And we've provided about 2 weeks for each particular skill. And we've included right here in this planning and pacing tool that process writing for you. So this is all part of the scope and sequence that we developed so that we make implementation easy for you. We want you to be able to pick this up and be able to understand exactly not only our thinking, but how it's going to work for you. So it's totally customizable for you. And if you use this pacing tool with the map, you'll really be able to customize that nicely for your classroom. And if there's any questions or comments as I'm going through any of these pieces, you are welcome to put that in the chat box. I'll be kind of manning that chat box as I go. All right, so let's go back to our units, back to our planning and pacing guide. And I want to talk a little bit about our baseline and checkpoint prompts. Now, in the hub, what we have done is we've actually chosen several prompts for you. Now, does it mean those are the only ones you get to choose from? No. But what we've done is tried to simplify the process, to be honest with you. So when you open up your baseline and checkpoint prompts, here's what we've done. We've created just a little bit of background information for you. And here's what we suggest. A baseline prompt is a prompt that you want to do prior to instruction. So if I'm about to go into a narrative unit, I'm going to use a narrative prompt. And I want to give my students about 45 to 60 minutes to write to the task that I'm giving them. And it's really going to provide you a little insight as to what skills your students possess and what they really are weak in. And again, I would put this into a writing portfolio or a student portfolio and hold on to it to show evidence of growth over time. That's the point of a baseline prompt. I just want to know where my kids are right now. And then I'm going to dive into the instruction. And I am so excited, and so are they, to see the growth at the end of that particular unit. So we've given you an option of 3 different prompts. And when you pick the prompt you want, it's just one that you're going to use. The baseline prompt is the original prompt. So that's the one you want to do prior to the unit. And then we have also some what we call checkpoint prompts. Now, a checkpoint prompt, let me head back over here. A checkpoint prompt can be used in 2 different ways. Sometimes I want to assess what students are doing midway through my unit. So I can do a checkpoint prompt midway through the unit, or I can just wait to the end of unit. So that's what those baseline and checkpoint prompts are really there for. I want to be able to know where my students start. I may want to see a midpoint just to see how well they're applying the skills, and then certainly an end of unit growth. With those baseline and checkpoint prompts, I just want to share with you where you're going to find them in your printed guide. Or if you don't like the ones that we've provided for you, that's okay, we get it. But in the very last section of your guide, I'm in an informational guide, so the last section is section 6. If you have a narrative guide, the last section is section 7. We do have a whole series of prompts that you are welcome to choose from. So as we go through here, those prompts, all the other ones that we have are in lesson number 1. And in the informational book, it's called Analyzing Writing Assignments. And then in the narrative book, it's lesson 1 as well in the last section of your guide. And it's called Analyzing Prompts for Givens and Variables. So as we go through this, here's where the prompts exist. And there's a whole series of them that you can choose from. Again, if you don't like the ones that we have chosen for you, you feel like maybe they're just not engaging enough for your students, you're welcome to go to the last section of your guide and choose the one that you would prefer. Now, before I hop out of this, I just want to show you, because some of you are not Hub users, this is what we have presented as a skill power. That's a direct to student piece that you would use as a PowerPoint to teach a skill or to teach a concept. And so those lie within the Hub exactly where you'll need them in the lesson plan. You can't get past it in order to get to the procedure, because typically the skill powers are right there within the procedure where they're located or where they're most useful. All right, I'm going to head back to that planning guide because I'm not quite done with those thoughts. As I continue to scroll down, after I go through my baseline and checkpoint prompts, now, of course, what do you need? Once you have done an assessment, it's time to use a rubric to assess, right? So we have 2 kinds of rubrics here for our genre-specific rubrics. This is the informational rubric, and the first type of rubric is what we call the analytic rubric. An analytic rubric is really designed to work with you every time you teach a skill. You may want to assess for that skill. And so these analytic rubrics are skill by skill. Notice there's a rubric for organization. There's a rubric for introductions. There's a full rubric for main ideas. These are the skills of informational writing. And here's our rubric for supporting details. These rubrics are based on a 4-point scale. And what I love about these rubrics is that they provide a little example of what that would look like in student writing. So if we're looking at supporting details and I've taught the detail generating questions, and now I'm doing an assessment for that particular skill, when I get to this rubric, And I'm not quite sure where my student is. Is that student a 2 or a 3? Is it a 3 or a 4? We've provided you with an example of what a 2 looks like, what a 3 looks like, what a 4 looks like. It's like a little mini anchor set right here so that you're not confused as to what to assess or how to assess your student. And so it just provides you with just a little help so that you know exactly how to score that particular assessment for your students. So those are what we call our analytic rubric, and they go skill by skill. But when you're doing a baseline, a checkpoint, or if you're doing some process writing, you want to use our holistic rubric, where we look at the piece as a whole. Now, this is, again, built on a 4-point scale. You still have categories. These are the skills included in informational writing. And then within that 4-point scale, we give you some indicators. So if you're looking at a full piece and it lacks an introduction, well, then you would score it a 1. But maybe it just lacks a compelling lead and the student attempted to name the topic, then it would score a 2. Now, what's going to happen as you're looking at the piece as a whole, your students are probably going to score more than likely in one category or another. So for the most part, what happens when you're using this holistic rubric, if I score a 2 in introduction, maybe I score a 3 in main ideas, but everything else shakes out as a 2, then your holistic score is a 2. Even though the main ideas might have been a little bit better, the rest of the piece would score a 2. And so that's really where the student would land. Now, what's great about that is that you're going to look at a student piece and you're going to make sure that you know exactly where they are in each skill. Then later on, when you're teaching skill by skill, you're going to show growth over time with those analytic rubrics as well. So these 2 rubrics are really important. One is the analytic rubrics are used throughout your instruction. The holistic rubrics are used for baseline, checkpoint, and for process writing. All right. So let's continue through the planning section of the guide. There's one more thing that I want to show you, if in fact it wants to pop up for me. Let's see, sometimes I have to go back to my library. For some reason, my internet might be a little slightly unstable. Here we go. Go back to my planning guide. And what I want to share with you are the videos that come within that planning guide. So when you're looking through the planning section of your guide in the hub, you want to make sure that you understand what you have your hands on. And those are really important pieces. All right. So does anyone have questions about what I've shared with you so far? And I'll just wait a second. I'll stop talking for 1 second. If you have questions about anything that you've seen so far, let me know. All right, looks like everybody's feeling pretty comfortable, pretty confident with everything. I'm just going to do a little refresh and make sure that my hub guides are working properly. And then I'm going to head over to our main website. So those of you who are printed guide users, and it looks like there's several of you here, our main website is where you're going to find some of what I've just shared with you. So in our main website, when you come there, it's empoweringwriters.com, very easy to get to. What you're going to find is that there's a series of tools up at the top. And for the most part, you're going to wind up in the teacher section. And when that opens up, what you want to go to is to the toolbox, because there's several things in the toolbox that are going to be really, really helpful for you. And when you get to your toolbox, you'll see that there's a whole series of pieces that you want to maybe click on. So we have those scope and sequence guides that I was talking about. Because in your printed guide, it's not the newest and greatest. If you click on the scope and sequence guides, it'll open up for you. And depending on where you live, sometimes we have specific scope and sequence guides for specific states. So if you live in Arkansas, because of your assessment, we've paced your schedule out a little differently. And then the standard guides is really where everybody else wants to fall. So when you look at those, that's great. Linda, use the hub exclusively. So all the pieces in the hub are really meant for you to use. So if you have both, I would always default to the hub. Here's why. The hub is able, we can actually make changes and upgrades at any point in the hub. As a matter of fact, if we find like a little typo on something, we can easily fix it and re-upload, and then the typo's gone. And you know that with a printed guide, we certainly cannot do that. So in our main website, what you want to do is you want to click on the pieces that you're interested in. Here's our scope and sequence, our standard pacing guides for grades 2 through 8. If you click right into our standard pacing guides for grades 2 through 8, you'll see exactly what I showed you in the hub. So you have everything, my printed partners, you have everything that our hub users have in terms of your scope and sequence. And then as you scroll through, you'll see there's the PDF and there's the pacing tool, the Google or the PowerPoint slides. So for those of you who don't use Google, we do know that that's sometimes an issue. So we make sure that you have some PowerPoint slides as well. All right, so those are our scope and sequence guides. You also have our standard alignment charts. We give you our graphic organizers. Those are included in all of our guides anyway. And then there's several other pieces here, but I want to go right to our standards alignments charts. We have several different state partners. And all of the standards are identified right within this standards alignment chart. So for those of you who are from Texas, you would obviously go to your Check Texas charts. And when you get there, these are your TEKS alignments. And you'll see that we have TEKS alignments for all grade levels. And I'm just going to take a peek into this TEKS alignment chart. You have a grade 2 narrative TEKS alignment. If you're a hub user, there's a PDF that you can utilize. If you're a print guide users, there's a different PDF, and that just is because of that first section of your guide is slightly different. So we made sure that you had access to that. And then there's an informational and opinion piece as well. So I'm just going to pull that PDF up and let's take a look quickly at what that looks like. This is our Texas partners. These are your strands. And then every lesson is indicated here on the side, and then the strand up on the top, and the matching coordinating TEKS. So when you're looking to make sure that you're meeting your state standards, all of the work has been done for you. No reason for you to have to figure out what lesson matches what standard, because sometimes that can be an undaunting task. So let's take a look at what one of the other alignment charts might look like. I have some Massachusetts people here as well. Your Massachusetts charts look a little bit different. What we've done on the Massachusetts and the standard alignment charts is that we've created it in context with our table of contents. So let me just pull up what that would look like for grade 2, and that all the grades look the same, obviously, with the appropriate standard identified. So when you come to your chart, it looks a little bit more like this. It's color coded. And as you scroll through, notice that what we've done is we've laid out all the lesson names. This is from the literacy launch. And then we've provided the standard that it matches, so that there is no guesswork for you. You don't have to go back and forth between your standards, trying to figure out which one it meets. We've done most of that work. And I do want you to notice, and Texas as well, I want you to notice that we don't only meet writing standards, but you're going to see our speaking and listening standards. You're going to see standards for reading information, reading literature. You'll see some reading anchor standards. All of the standards so often are part of the work that we do, particularly in that literacy launch, because it's about reading with author's eyes. So the Massachusetts and the standards charts are similarly organized. And then these are for every other state that we work with. We have lots of states that we work with. We have this very same work that we've done. Now, Canada, we're working with some of our Canadian trainers to see if maybe there's a way that we can get some standards relationship for you. It's not something that we have right now. So I know we have at least one from Edmonton. And if you are from Canada, we're going to work to get some of those alignment charts handled for you, because I know that's a little bit of a sticking point. We just want to make sure that we're meeting all of your needs as well. All right, questions or comments or thoughts? Anybody have anything that they're still a little bit confused on? All right, so let's go back to our PowerPoint here. Let me just go back into presentation mode. So all of the work that we've kind of looked at, everything that we've done here, I showed you how to get to it in the hub. In our main website, you're going to go to one of the tools in the tools box. I took you to the standard alignments and the pacing guides in those tools. Your prompts, those are going to be located in your printed guide. We don't put our prompts up on our website, but those are on your printed guide, so you have access to those very easily. And then all the rubrics are also located right within our website. And there's one more rubric that I forgot to show you. I'm sorry. I'm going to go back home to our home website. I want to show you our latest and greatest rubric, because so many of us now also need to write response to text. It's not just enough to write to a prompt any longer. We're not just writing generative pieces, so we're not just writing narrative and just writing informational, but so often now we have to respond to source text. So we've created a constructed response rubric. This is really hot off the press, just so that you know. And our constructed response rubric, once again, the same idea behind our genre-specific rubric. We make sure that it matches your instruction, so the language is the language of instruction. There should be indicators at each score point using specific language. We make sure that we've done that as well. And then we want to show growth over time that's reasonable. Now, our constructed response rubrics are based upon a 0 to 2 point scale, which is very typical of constructed response rubrics or response to text rubrics. And when we look at that, what we find is that not only is it a 0 to 2 point scale, but we've also included those indicators. These are the specific skills that students need to have for an effective response. They need to be able to write a main idea sentence. They need to have the evidence and the explanation. And explanation, how do we do that? Where do we find our evidence? Well, we want to be able to teach students how to paraphrase evidence and how to cite it specifically. So again, another skill, and then ultimately a conclusion statement. And then based upon that, we've given you some tasks and some score points. We also analyze that score point and tell you why that student would have scored a 2 or a 1. Now, there's no sample for a 0, because typically in a 0, you know what that looks like. The student either attempted something or it's blank. And so when we look at the scores, we made sure that we had at least score point 1 and 2. And because these are task specific and source specific, we've also included the sources for you so that you can download and print those as well. So there are sample responses for a narrative task and for an informational task. Both tasks, either narrative or informational, require the use of the same constructed response rubric. And here's why. You might be reading a literary piece, but the response, when you're responding, it's usually in an expository tone. So you're going to use the exact same constructed response rubric. All right, we have a couple of minutes before we're completed, before our time is up. So I'm going to turn this over to you for questions or comments or thoughts. Anything at all that you want to share? Those of you who are using the hub, maybe you have questions about that in particular. Those of you who are in printed guide, if you're interested in doing a free trial for our hub, if you go back to our website, you can grab a free trial for our hub, and we open it up for you for about 2 weeks. We give you the ability to look through that book and see the differences between the print and the hub guide. Some of you also, with your registration here today, you also got a glossary of terms. which is really important because so often at Empowering Writers, we use some language that's ours. It might be specific to us. So that glossary is going to help you and kind of point you in the right direction as well. So any questions? I'm going to stop my share. And you can either unmute yourself. We're kind of a small group. You can unmute yourself, or you are welcome to type in or chat in any questions or comments or thoughts. All right, everybody. If there's no other questions, I'll be hanging out here. But you are welcome to head on out back into your life now. I know some of you who are coming right out of school, it could be a long day. So have a great afternoon, and thank you all for coming.